Hi, my name is Ben Carlson. I'm the Director of Urban Design with Goody Clancy.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Onifer. I was the project manager on this Manchester TOD effort, and I'm a planner at Goody Clancy. Moving forward this effort, we really looked at what redevelopment could happen in the area south of the Mill Yard and downtown as rail service may extend from Boston along the Lowell line up to Manchester. And the importance of both the great assets in downtown, the Mill Yard, employment there, a downtown grocery store, of what future transit-oriented development that maximizes the value of those transportation assets, promotes a walkable neighborhood, and allows for thriving development in Manchester to occur. Transit-oriented development in Manchester is really building on a rich history of transit-oriented development with the history of where the rail station used to be in this area, as well as the walk to work environment of the Mill Yard historically. And so returning to some of those patterns of transit and walkability in this area. As part of this process, we conducted extensive stakeholder interviews with community leaders, property owners, developers, and other stakeholders. We really heard some common themes you're hearing as part of the master planning process. The strong demand for multifamily housing, the concern about the feasibility of moving forward with projects because of rising costs, both land costs and construction costs, the need for parking solutions in this area and in downtown in the Mill Yard, but also a lot of pride in the success that you have had in supporting downtown revitalization so far, and have been able to sustain through the pandemic, through the work bringing outdoor dining to Elm Street. So a chance to really build on that success. Before the pandemic, we were able to have an extensive public charrette, and it heard some strong themes of goals for this area over the long term and as well as short-term intervention. So walkability, the opportunity for transit to help fill some of those parking problems in the area and downtown. Importance of the Gaslight District and Elm Street as places and possibilities of places for entertainment, as well as the sites near the Elliott at the river's edge as a major employment center, as a major destination to make sure the southern portion of this study area is equally integrated into the TOD. So moving from those core themes of how to achieve transit-oriented development in Manchester and fulfill that vision, we went through an alternatives process that built upon the transportation investments envisioned in the 2020 Build Grant, and looked at where a rail station would be accessible, but also catalytic to future development. How could those connections really make sure that we have the transportation network and the access to development sites needed? And where are there property owners that are interested in pursuing transit-oriented redevelopment? And so as part of that alternatives process, on the next slide, we looked at stations in the north that might be in a more walkable radius to downtown in the Mill Yard, a station in the center portion of the study area, just across the tracks from the stadium, that would really be able to reach into both the northern and southern portions of the study area. And finally, one in the south that might maximize and be located near the Elliott at River's Edge, as well as MTA property in the south. And through that alternatives process, working with a steering committee of major stakeholders, looking at the infrastructure investments and the development potential of those, we really found that the central location was the consensus choice. And on the next slide, the reasons for why the central location was that consensus choice is that it really maximized the value of the Build Grant infrastructure to building out that network, balance the rail station location between serving downtown and the Mill Yard and being able to help catalyze important new development to the south. And in the near term, offering real opportunity to connect parking resources, housing, and jobs through a Mill Yard shuttle.
The strategy here is not to require development on any particular site, but really to open up new opportunities. And earlier you saw the historic photos of this area at a time of industry. Unfortunately today, there's not much more street infrastructure than at that time. And a lot of the parcel lines make it hard to access different properties. But what's terrific and what the city's own work through the Build Grant has shown is that a relatively modest investment in new street connections can really deliver an enormous amount of value by putting all kinds of properties back into play, and also by connecting this area to the neighborhoods and downtown and the mill yard around it. And so what that means is, when we looked at the numbers, we had a real estate market study done, and that found opportunity for about 1,000 housing units in the area, as well as a couple 100,000 square feet of office space and other uses over time. And this is over a 10 to 20 year period. And the value that that could all bring in the end is 4 to 1 in terms of private investment to every dollar of public investment that might be needed for new street infrastructure or shared district parking. And we see that as a very, very favorable ratio, and it really makes this area a great opportunity for economic development and community development for Manchester, serving not just investment in this particular area, putting it back on the map, but also connecting very well to everything that's around it. And as an example of if this property were redeveloped, the value of all that new property and investment could really match the value you get in downtown, several times the value of these existing properties. Again, this is all at the option of the property owner, but there are many different opportunities, and we know already there are many property owners who have interest in reinvestment in the area. We're starting to see that momentum happening. So in the end, again, about $100 million in investment in new infrastructure. A good chunk of that is for parking, phased over time. That can deliver up to $600 million of new real estate value. So what might that look like? We made a few sketches to demonstrate the opportunity. It's not a prescription, but it shows the scale or the extent of change that might be possible here as we're looking over Elm Street toward the Merrimack River. This is what it might look like over time. A whole series of sites that today are light industrial or vacant, getting a mix of uses and a variety of building types that fit in well and transition from that downtown and the mill yard to neighborhoods. Now it's a big area, and we can see this area as really developing in stages and having different types of places of identity. One of those is the Gaslight District, the place that already has identity, but has a lot more potential than it does today. And in a few more minutes, we'll share bigger versions of these photos so you can get a sense of how they might change. There's a central area that we're calling the switch yard, and that's where we're suggesting the new rail station happen. And in the near term, because we know that rail may take a decade to come, it can also be a bus hub for the shuttle running north and south. So there's a near-term opportunity for that to be an active transportation destination, but also a mixed-use district with places to work and live. There's the area we're calling Riverview, which is a combination of the MTA site, which might be redevelopable in stages. School buses can be parked elsewhere. And also the Elliott at River's Edge owns additional property there. And that's a large and flexible area together with potential for great river views and good access. Really a tremendous amount of possibility that could happen there. And then finally, there's South Elm, which is taking the existing assets along Elm Street and having infill development that fits in well with the Bakersville neighborhood and reconnects the neighborhood across Elm Street and Queen City Avenue, which divide up that area a bit today. And then finally, of course, the South Mill Yard, already occupied by SNHU, the stadium, other uses, but has potential for a lot more. So Gaslight District, this is what it looks like today. It wouldn't take much to unlock this opportunity here. This is some reinvestment in streetscape, some of which could address the city's stormwater needs, and rehab of these buildings to bring in dining and additional uses to really fulfill the promise of this as an entertainment and dining district to complement the arena and the Center for New Hampshire nearby. This is the switch area. Today, it's the intersection of Elm and Valley Street with Market Basket off to the right. This is what it could look like. We could extend Valley Street right down toward the station, as this is the heart of a new district, really an extension of downtown and the reinvestment that's been happening in Elm Street, in a place that's much more walkable. It's about people and not so much about traffic. The view on the bottom shows this existing Riverview area, just a lot of possibility here. The MTA is at the table as a partner and interested in public-private partnership that might be able to bring new investment here, while it's also reinforcing our transit resources and services. And this is South Elm, turning the more auto-oriented uses of South Elm today into a place that really feels like a neighborhood for everybody. And even South Commercial Street along SNHU, should the university or WMUR wish to reinvest in their properties over time, there's tremendous more potential that could happen in this quarter and really support the broader mill yard and its mission. I'll hand it back to Kathleen.
And I want to go back to Ben's point about that investment in public infrastructure really catalyzing this development, and the possibility to make that investment in a phased way that's really tied to development. And the most important public infrastructure investments we can make are really to the connections, the streets and trails that we need to make sure that we're building that walkable environment, but also providing access to parcels so that they can be able to be redeveloped, and getting those parking needs met. And so just quickly, we'll go through some of the phases that we've laid out, both early phases that really build off of the build grant infrastructure itself, as well as think about the near-term opportunity to move for public-private partnerships at the MTA site. That later phases may help further make those connections. And then finally, happening even before rail service arrives. And that finally in this last phase, really when the rail station and rail infrastructure moves in, an important connection would be bridging those railroad tracks to make sure that that neighborhoods on the other side of the river are really able to tie in across to the Merrimack Bridge and the Riverwalk paths directly into the rail station. So, great phased investment in streets and trails. We've also looked at what a phased investment in a mill yard transit shuttle could be. So linking remote parking options with those major destinations in the mill yard and downtown, and SNHU and other areas of the study area as they develop. So both that initial phase really focused on serving, to SNHU, and then as future infrastructure is built, that it could extend, further south and even out to redevelopment happening at Velcro and Sundial Center, or to park and ride facilities at Exit 6. Another sort of key method for implementation, it would be really advancing development through public-private partnerships. So the opportunity of a transportation management association to help work on some of this infrastructure like a mill yard shuttle, to be a partner in making those transportation improvements happen. The possibility of sort of public or mission-driven public-private partnership for sites like the MTA site or property that might help support the Elliott at River's Edge mission. And of course, developing shared parking infrastructure is always going to be a part of achieving, a vision for this area that's efficient with its parking resources and really maximizing its development opportunities. Another key point is sort of implementation. As a board of mayor and aldermen, we really have thought about implementation through each part of this plan, and there's a detailed implementation memo that includes more detailed descriptions of those infrastructure improvements we've reviewed and a funding plan. We've also really said that near-term support for development, whether it's moving forward with a TIF structure like has been able to fund riverfront improvements in Nashua, and continuing the use of tax deferral programs and looking at the impact fee program will really help support the near-term ability to move forward. And finally, some changes to zoning and urban design regulation to make sure that the development that moves forward in this area is ultimately achieving the vision. So as part of that implementation memo, we've laid out a sort of potential future zoning map that really extends higher density development and the overlays that help provide a transit-oriented building form throughout the study area. Another really key point that feeds into the ongoing master plan work is making sure those transitions and walkability to neighboring residential areas are achieved. So, whether through form-based requirements, a sort of transect or sort of new code tools, that this land use vision is really feeding into walkability to surrounding neighborhoods as well as part of the overall master plan vision. And so we just thank you very much for having us to speak to you here by video today. This plan is really exciting for its ability to really move Manchester's South Elm area into the next century of sort of thriving as a place where you can walk to work, a place where we can all live, and a place with great transportation assets that really connected at the heart of the region.